Irreplaceable. Apparition, portkeys, blue powder could achieve the same goal. This one, however, was a lonely half, missing its counterpart. Deal, cabinet, and repair method included. But I want to see the Unicorn King's bone first, Borgin said, eyes narrowing. You're involved in this trade too, aren't you? Voldemort only smiled, passing over the silver case. Once everything was confirmed, he gave delivery instructions. To Borgin's surprise, he didn't ask for it to be sent to an estate or wizarding home. Instead, he named a street corner in London at a precise time. Borgin followed the protocol, asking no questions. After all, that unsellable cabinet had now been traded for something truly valuable. Who was he to complain? Chapter 10. The Final Preparations. Truth, Truth, and More Truth. Uta Hagen, founder of HB Studio in New York and two-time Tony Award winner, tapped her chest with each word. Acting isn't lying. It's not faking. It's not putting on a show. Even a trace of that in your mind, and you've already failed. Quirrell nodded seriously, committing every word to memory. It was now July 20th. One day remained before his meeting with Albus Dumbledore. Today was Quirrell's final acting lesson. At the end of this course, Hagen continued, remember, acting is instinctive, both inside and out. You don't consciously control every tiny movement. If you do, it looks stiff. But focusing only on your feelings detaches your performance from reality. Watch your scene partner, watch your surroundings. Whether inner emotion or outward action, nothing should feel forced. If it feels natural, it's right. Quirrell nodded solemnly, the perfect image of a diligent student, though in reality he was already performing, a Muggle apprentice playing the role of an aspiring actor. So far, it was convincing. That concludes our lessons, Hagen said warmly. I hope you apply these methods to theater in England. That would be my honor. Voldemort took control of the body, stood, and bowed slightly. As for HB Studios' future funding, the Riddle Foundation will be in touch. You may rest assured, Professor. Hagen nodded, saying nothing of money, offering only a few final tips before departing. Not long after, Voldemort stepped out of 36 Hall Street, Coleman Street, London. Surrounded by several attendants, Voldemort looked up at the gleaming gilded sign on the 8-story building. Riddle Foundation. Very good, Pocus. The praise made the tall, thin-skinned Pocus flush with excitement. Steadying himself, he signaled for the others to give them space, then leaned closer. Mr. Riddle, about tonight, Pearl and the dog. We'll discuss that later. Voldemort brushed the matter aside. But, Pocus, you must carry yourself with more composure. Even if you represent my will, you won't earn respect if you falter. Pocus followed Voldemort's gaze. Sure enough, the few men who had stepped aside were whispering among themselves. Not with admiration, he guessed. I understand, Mr. Riddle, Pocus said firmly, shooting a glare at the distant project managers, who didn't respond. Come, let's start the meeting. Voldemort strode into the Riddle building, the others hurrying after him. The 8-story building wasn't his outright property. He'd leased the top floor and purchased the naming rights. They took the lift to the 8th floor and entered the conference room. Voldemort sat at the head of the table, Pocus just behind him, while the others reported on progress. The insurance company setup will need another month. For early marketing, we've chosen WPP. As for finance, Voldemort jotted down notes, occasionally stopping the speaker to clarify points. When the first report ended, the next man jumped in. Apple is still in a slump. They don't need cash, but when we proposed acquiring technology and investing it with them, they agreed. Hold on, Voldemort interrupted. What do you mean by investing technology? We acquire technology and provide it to Apple for free. If it proves useful, we take a percentage of profits or an equivalent in shares. Voldemort frowned. Apple wouldn't recover until 1997 when Jobs returned. That meant years of uncertain investment with no guaranteed return. Mr. Riddle, the man added quickly, seeing the frown, we'll be selective about the tech. If Apple rejects it, we'll place it under Riddle Internet Technology instead. Voldemort nodded reluctantly and motioned for him to continue. Other internet companies were also on the watch list, though none could yet be bought in large amounts. They would have to proceed carefully. More reports followed: banking, mining, real estate, education, science, wine estates. The sheer scope made Voldemort's head ache. But to make money, he had to spread his investments wide. As a traveler from another time, he had foresight others lacked. If he ran these ventures personally, he might achieve little, but from the top, directing others, he could see the paths clearly. All of this was part of a long-term plan. He wasn't seeking immediate profit. The initial accumulation of capital was already complete, and Voldemort's method had been simple: magic. As a master of legitimacy, he always had ways to persuade people. Once he swayed a wealthy individual, a single drop soon infected an entire river, and that river would inevitably reach the sea. Entrust your money to me. I will grow it at 10% compound interest annually. Sign the contract under the Riddle family name, and you will have wealth without end. Those honeyed words made the Riddle family, otherwise known only through a few photographs, seem utterly trustworthy. Fortunes flowed ceaselessly into the Riddle Trust, pushing the 2-month-old organization into explosive growth. As for repayment, the investment arm has already committed 80% of our assets into the Soviet Union. If events there truly unfold as you predicted, they will. Voldemort cut him off coldly. Why 80% and not a full 100? Ugh! The manager shivered under Voldemort's gaze. We wanted to hedge our risk. Since 90% of the trust's capital is tied up in Riddle investments, if there is no if, I've already told you, Voldemort said, his voice like ice, silencing the room. The remaining 20% must be invested within a month. Do you understand? The event he had foreseen was nearly at hand. Missing the maximum profit now could mean never again. Yes, Mr. Riddle. We'll act immediately. The manager rose and hurried away. Voldemort waved the others off as well, except Keen Borches, who lingered behind. Mr. Riddle, about tonight. We'll discuss that later, Voldemort said, brushing it aside. Borches, tell me, how are things between you and Shashulin? Very well, Borches answered immediately. He's greedy for money. I passed him every nut you gave me without skimming a coin. He says he'll inform me in advance of the next operation. Voldemort nodded. Stay on top of this. It's very important. Borches nodded sharply, understanding. Good, Voldemort exhaled, rising to his feet. We're going to Surrey. On the way, we'll discuss arrangements concerning your son, the dog, and the Dursley family. Chapter 11. The dinner at number 4 Privet Drive night had fallen, and the garden lights at number 4 Privet Drive burned brightly. The Dursleys, a tall, thin woman and a tall, portly man, bustled about inside their neat, hedge-lined yard, and they made sure to speak loudly enough for the whole street to catch the reason for their busyness. Borches made the right call, Mr. Dursley boomed, stretching his non-existent neck. The Riddle Trust once invited me to join, but I recommended Borches instead. Yes, indeed, Mrs. Dursley agreed, craning her long neck to peer toward the neighboring houses. She saw no one, but she was certain everyone was hiding behind their doors, eavesdropping. And now Borches has really made it. He's a success, Mr. Dursley continued, his voice carrying down the street. He wants to repay me. He's invited me to work with him. Will you go? Mrs. Dursley called, adding more charcoal to the grill. Of course not. I like it here, and I like my current job, Mr. Dursley said, setting up the dining table as if half the street were listening. But I must politely decline. He's my friend, and after all, this is the Riddle Trust we're talking about. Oh, heavens, the Riddle Trust, London's rising star in finance, and you turned it down. Mrs. Dursley stepped up, cupped his round, necklace face, and cooed. Darling, you're remarkable. Mr. Dursley accepted her kiss proudly, inhaling deeply as he prepared to continue boasting. I want red meat sausages. Piers likes them too. Why aren't there any on the table? Their beloved Dudley shrieked, teetering on the edge of flipping the table. Both parents abandoned their performance immediately. They're ready, Dudley. I've got them right here. Mrs. Dursley hurried into the dining room and returned with a plate of red meat sausages she had prepared in advance. Crisis averted, just in time for a silver Rolls-Royce to glide down Privet Drive and stop in front of number 4. Piers, what took you so long? Dudley, still flushed from his sausage-related fury, bolted out of the garden gate. My father had a meeting. We came as soon as it ended. Piers stepped out of the car, not straight toward the house, but producing a purebred poodle from inside. This is the Daphne you told me about? Dudley scooped up the poodle without ceremony, roughly handling it as he spoke. Piers didn't mind. He had no interest in keeping a dog. It had been his father's idea entirely. That's her. Dudley, I'm starving. I want red meat sausages, Piers said, clutching his stomach. Everything's ready. Come in, Piers. And my friend Borches and his wife, Mr. Dursley said, emerging from the house and greeting the guests with cheek-to-cheek embraces. They all filed into the small garden, and the barbecue began. The men discussed business, the women exchanged small talk, and the boys played with the dog. Everything seemed perfectly cheerful until Mr. Borches asked an unexpected question. I heard you've got another child. Harry, was it? Mrs. Dursley's chatter died instantly. Ah, yes, I mean, he might. Possibly. Mr. Dursley's eyes flicked toward the cupboard under the stairs. He rubbed his hands nervously, unsure what to say. He's ill-mannered, Mrs. Dursley interjected smoothly. Rachel can vouch for that. She's met Harry. Indeed, Mrs. Borches said without hesitation. Best not to let him out. Last time, during Dudley's birthday, he caused quite the disaster. He talked to a snake and had it bite me, Piers added between bites of sausage. In that case, there's really no need for him to come out, Mr. Borches said. The Dursleys relaxed slightly, only for the next words to catch them off guard. But in the long term, I think I'd better meet him anyway. Keen, Mr. Dursley said, puzzled. What's the point? Vernon, I'm on excellent terms with the trust's owner. He's considering closer collaboration, possibly bringing me into management, even making my family one of the core houses. Mr. Dursley's small eyes widened. If that happened, the Borches family would soar. But my family is small, and you're the one who recommended me to the trust in the first place. Borches looked him in the eye. Vernon, I owe you a great deal. Keen, don't say that, Vernon replied modestly, though a flush of excitement had crept up his cheeks. He waited eagerly for Borches to continue, and Borches did, without disappointing him. I want to bring you into the trust as well. In the future, our children and nephews will join too. Just as Dursley opened his mouth, Borges interrupted, serious. The consortium is vast. We need more nephews and kin involved to gain greater control of its wealth. And from what I hear from Piers, that boy listens to Dudley. Vernon, this is an asset. We must fully utilize our resources. Borges's words hit home. Dursley turned to his wife. Mrs. Dursley, a former typist, had no idea how to respond. She gave her husband a look that said, It's up to you. Call Harry out. Dursley ordered. He should meet Mr. Borges and learn respect. Mrs. Dursley moved immediately. We could share some food with him, Borges suggested with a wink. Assistants should be trained young. Dursley smiled knowingly, nodding. Plans were forming in his mind, but aloud he said firmly, I'm not leaving Grunnings. You know how hard it was to get here. Then do even better, Borges replied. When the time is right, I'll propose the consortium acquire it. Someone will need to run Grunnings, won't they? Borges raised his glass with a smile. After a moment of surprise, Dursley's face lit up, and he clinked his own glass against it. Clink! The sound was crisp, like coins striking together. 2 streets away from Privet Drive, in a modest apartment, Voldemort sat in a rocking chair, turning a yew wand over in his hands. Before him, dozens of television screens displayed the backyard of number 4, Privet Drive. The sound piped in alongside the picture. Is it really necessary to be this cautious, Dark Lord? Asked the vampire witch Daenerys. Of course. This child is. Voldemort broke off abruptly, leaning forward as his gaze locked onto the scrawny boy on screen. The boy was much smaller than Dudley, with a thin face, knobby knees, messy black hair, and behind broken round spectacles, a pair of vivid green eyes. And there, though blurred by the low resolution, was the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead. Harry Potter, Voldemort murmured inwardly. Fate's chosen? Or the very child of the plane itself? Chapter 12, The Blood of an Enemy. Harry. Don't say his full name, Voldemort interrupted sharply. We must be careful. It's possible even his name is cursed. All right, Daenerys agreed easily, eyes fixed on the monitor. How did he defeat you back then? Defeat, no kill. Voldemort shook his head. But not by his own doing. It was his mother, Lily Potter. She sacrificed herself, using her life and love to cast an ancient magic. Even now, it shields her child. Daenerys glanced at the boy on screen, surprised. A bloodline-bound protection spell? Yes, Voldemort replied, somewhat impressed. He hadn't expected her to deduce the truth from so little. A long life brings its own lessons, Daenerys said with a small smile. Voldemort nodded thoughtfully, his eyes fixed on the feed. On screen, Borges chatted cheerfully with Harry, though the boy's gaze kept darting toward the barbecue grill. He was clearly starving. "Eat the fatty cut," Borges said, placing a piece of sizzling meat onto Harry's plate. "It will satisfy both your taste and your body." "I'm not letting him eat it," Dudley shouted, leaping up. I'm not letting him either," wheezed Piers, coughing on a bite of sausage. Harry's green eyes darted around. He wanted to snatch the meat and run, but the odds weren't in his favor. He looked pleadingly at Borges. The Dursleys and Borges's wife watched as the man decided. "My boss always taught me, you must learn to share," Borges said, giving Harry a reassuring smile. "When you get something, share it. When you learn something, teach it. Only then will others see you as trustworthy, and when you're in need, you can rely on them in return." The children looked puzzled, but Mr. Dursley understood the real meaning. Borges was giving Harry the meat. "That was you speaking?" Daenerys asked from her seat. "Yes," Voldemort nodded. "Is that your reflection after failing to rule the British wizarding world last time?" "One of them." Voldemort nodded sincerely at Daenerys. "I don't blame you. When I was in power, I never gave you any special resources, so—" Daenerys simply nodded. Once Voldemort turned away, her eyes shimmered with reverence. When the most powerful dark wizard reflects on his failures, who could possibly defeat him a second time? Dumbledore? Too old. Her hand lifted slowly, reaching for Voldemort's arm. He turned sharply, stopping her. "This isn't my real body. Wait a little longer." After a brief pause, he added, "Forgive me, and loyalty is something I take very seriously." "So do I. Otherwise, I wouldn't have waited hundreds of years for you." Her beautiful eyes brimmed with love. Voldemort felt his heart beat faster and looked away toward the television. "I've prepared everything. I will return. Let's talk about these matters once I'm whole again." He murmured softly for her alone, and the smile curling Daenerys' lips showed her delight. They sank into silence, the only sound the television. Borges, a natural talker, imitated Voldemort's calm, confident manner. "You should eat another piece, Harry. You're still growing." He called Harry over, then whistled for Jeffney as well. "Eat more. You could grow as tall and strong as Dudley. You too, Piers. Cough, cough." Mid-sentence, he choked on smoke drifting from the grill, coughing twice. At the same moment, the dog at Harry's feet, busy gnawing a sausage, received some hidden command. It abruptly dropped the sausage and snapped at Harry's ankle. It happened so fast. Harry had been swallowing eagerly, plate in hand, eyes fixed on the roast. Then, "Ah!" he cried out, dropping his plate, though he didn't fall. The bite hadn't been deep. "Harry, are you all right?" Borges asked with concern as the Dursleys rushed over. Only the two children clapped and cheered. "It bit me, but it didn't really hurt, just startled me." He rolled up his pant leg, showing 2 shallow scratches on his ankle. Faint blood, but nothing serious. "It's nothing, but you really are a troublemaker," his aunt said, frowning. "Don't talk to him like that." Bocius shook his head. "We should go to the hospital. The dog's new. We can't be sure it's had its rabies shots." "No need. Absolutely not," Uncle Vernon said. "Just a scratch. You must have scared Jeffney." "Vernon, I won't let myself feel guilty. A few precautionary shots aren't a big deal." Bocius had already pulled car keys from his pocket. "We'll go. Just the two of us. Back in no time. There's a hospital nearby. I know the place." Before Vernon could argue, Bocius was already leading Harry out the gate. Seeing this, Vernon grumbled to his wife and Mrs. Bocius, "Harry's a troublemaker," before following along. The three got into the Rolls-Royce and drove away from Privet Drive. "This is your plan?" Daenerys asked. "Bring Harry here, take his blood, and then kill him?" "No, Danny." Voldemort smiled wryly. "Don't think only of killing. That's a last resort." "Then what will you do?" she asked, puzzled. "I just need his blood. As for him, he's still useful. We'll keep him alive for now." Daenerys pursed her lips, clearly disapproving. Vampires never let an enemy live. She still remembered the night she had learned the location of her foes. Voldemort shrugged, making no attempt to change her mind. They waited silently until a Cadillac appeared on one of the many screens before them. Bocius got out first, then Harry, then the bulky Vernon, his size making him awkward and slow. "I'll take him through the process. You can wait here," Bocius said helpfully. Vernon, unwilling to show his clumsiness, waved them ahead. The two entered the hospital, stepping into another camera frame. "Through a Muggle hospital's blood draw?" Daenerys asked. "Yes, get bitten by a dog and there's always a checkup." While they spoke, Harry had already reached the blood draw station. He rolled up his sleeve and offered his arm. "The blood will start here, then follow this route," Voldemort said, pointing to the screen. "Watch carefully. I need to be sure no one tampers with the bag." "Would anyone really do that?" she asked, though her eyes stayed fixed on the feed. "Not that I know of. But I can't risk it. My resurrection depends on this." Daenerys' gaze sharpened at his words. "You'll need rabies and tetanus shots. First, we'll run a blood test. It's safer." The doctor spoke gently, tapping Harry's thin arm to encourage blood flow. His veins were so small and weak that she had to coax them along. "All right. Oh, okay." Harry kept his head down, eyes squeezed shut. He didn't dare watch the doctor take out a blood bag far larger than expected. For a moment, he wondered if she meant to drain him dry. "Don't worry, child. I just need a few extra tests. It won't take long." Her voice was soothing, but her eyes stayed on the bag as it slowly filled. A short distance away, Borges had stopped Vernon Dursley, pointed at Harry, and started a conversation. Vernon barely glanced over, then returned to talking. Harry was of no concern to him. Eventually, the doctor had collected enough blood. Any more might have risked his safety. "Go on and get your shots. Don't be afraid. You're brave," she said, rising and taking the blood bag. A nurse led Harry to receive his injections quickly. The doctor, however, followed a carefully planned route straight to where Voldemort waited. Approaching the next camera junction, "I'll shift my view first, then you," Voldemort instructed. He switched to another feed, watching until the doctor appeared. "Done. Your turn now." They leapfrogged their surveillance, ensuring one of them always had eyes on her. Click, the door opened. The doctor stepped in. "Sir, I've done as..." "Obliviate." A sweep of the purple-handled yew wand, and her eyes went glassy. Without another word, she retraced her steps, her memory erased. The blood bag floated into Voldemort's grasp. "An enemy's blood," he whispered, lifting a single droplet from the bag and letting it fall onto his bare ankle. Sizz! Like water hitting hot oil, it sizzled, searing the flesh. Voldemort drew a sharp breath at the pain. "Genuine," he murmured, smiling faintly before glancing at Daenerys. "Help me, Dany, as you wish." She pulled an ancient wooden jar from her robes. "Pour the blood in here." Voldemort did so without hesitation, draining the bag completely. Daenerys sealed the jar, bit her finger, and drew a blood-red, malevolent sigil across the wood. The vessel creaked as though bound by invisible chains. "That's all it takes?" Voldemort asked, intrigued. "It's a preservation method stolen from the old blood vampire clans," she explained. "It keeps Harry Potter's blood alive for future use. Vampire magic is all bloodline magic. It costs blood, but unlike wizardry, it doesn't require complex rituals." Voldemort nodded, tucking the jar carefully into his robe pocket beside a few bones. "All without incident. Seems I was overly cautious." He exhaled, but his eyes caught the central monitor among the wall of screens. It showed Privet Drive. One by one, the street lamps went dark, not naturally, but as if their light were being pulled toward one corner. Voldemort's eyes narrowed. Leaning closer to the grainy feed, he made out a sweep of purple robes trailing along the ground, and half a high-heeled boot with a clasp. Daenerys followed his gaze, but saw only his sudden, coiled alertness, as though he might strike at any moment. Finally, Voldemort exhaled a long breath. Then, without warning, he acted, shutting off every camera feed, pulling each tape, tying them together in one hand, and powering down the recorders. "Take me out of here. Apparate, anywhere," he said, his voice clipped and urgent. "Now?" Daenerys asked, confused. "Now. Immediately. At once." His tone sharpened, edged with violence. "All right." She didn't hesitate, grasping his arm, and apparated them away. Bang! They vanished from the apartment as though they had never been there. "What did you see?" The mountain wind howled around them, but Daenerys barely noticed, turning to Voldemort. "Dumbledore." He said it plainly, with no need for secrecy. "Dumbledore?" This time, it was Daenerys' turn to be startled. If she had known it was Dumbledore earlier, she didn't even want to think that thought. "Where is this?" Voldemort asked, scanning the mountain scenery. "I come here to daydream," Daenerys replied after catching her breath. "It's primitive. I like that." Voldemort nodded. The primordial faction detested modernity. All relics, all old ways. "There's someone there," Voldemort said, pointing to a flicker of firelight halfway up the slope. Daenerys narrowed her eyes, then smiled. Vampires always had sharp sight. It's the little shepherd boy, 5 or 6 years old. I see him often. Herding sheep in the middle of the night? Voldemort asked, puzzled. He must be in trouble again. He's terribly clumsy, always losing his sheep. I help him find them every time. She glanced at Voldemort. May I help him this time? Of course. Together, Voldemort said immediately. After the jolt of their earlier encounter, he knew he needed to act. Something that would ease the guilt from the fear he'd felt upon seeing Dumbledore. That fear stemmed partly from his lingering fragment and partly from Lin Zuo's enmity toward the White Wizard. Together, it revealed a bravery less absolute than he liked to believe. They descended the slope. As they neared, they saw the shepherd boy, drowning in clothes 2 sizes too large. Voldemort found him oddly familiar. Exix, sex X. Daenerys began speaking in a tongue Voldemort didn't understand, something like the language from the Albanian Black Forest in his memories. The child replied with tearful words. Voldemort understood none of them. Shall we find the sheep for him? What about a summoning charm, he suggested. Daenerys looked at him, and to his surprise, her emerald eyes were tinged with sorrow. What is it? He said. Daenerys rubbed her eyes, as though wiping away tears. The grandfather he loved most died in the war. He was so heartbroken he came here to hide. Voldemort was startled but quickly realized where they were, likely near the Croatia-Serbia border, the only area currently in conflict. Damn this war, he muttered. Child, your grandfather will watch over you from the sky. Each of those stars. Voldemort cut her off abruptly. What's his name? He asked. Him? Daenerys blinked. Modric. Luka Modric. He shares his grandfather's name. Modric? So it is you. Voldemort's eyes burned as he gazed at the weeping boy. The more he looked, the surer he became. This was the same midfield master he knew so well. Chapter 14. A Few Matters in Hogsmeade Village. Madame Rosmerta, you're as beautiful as ever. At the 3 broomsticks, Voldemort offered the compliment quietly. Perhaps due to his lingering soul fragment, he found the 40-something Rosmerta more alluring than the seemingly 20-something Daenerys. Quirrell, you've grown even more charming, Rosmerta said, casting him a flirtatious glance as she handed over a butterbeer. You seem to be in good spirits. Voldemort lifted the mug, drank deeply, and replied, I am. Today I'm seeing Dumbledore, interviewing for the Defense Against the Dark Arts position. He handed her the interview letter as he spoke. You're planning to use my fireplace then? She asked, glancing at the parchment. Yes, though it's still early. I'll need something to eat first. I'm hungry. He tucked the letter back into his robes. The 3 broomsticks was one of the few places with a direct flue connection to Hogwarts. The timing, according to the letter, meant he could step through from here once Professor McGonagall's fireplace opened around 1:30. But his good mood wasn't just about the interview. The real thing was last night's phone call. He'd confirmed Dumbledore hadn't visited the Dursleys. Some magic tied to Harry, or perhaps a squib, had kept him away. Whatever the reason, Dumbledore hadn't come looking. I could make you a sandwich if you like, Rosmerta offered. Voldemort's gaze lingered on her graceful figure. Then suddenly, he thought of Ron. If memory served, Ron had feelings for her. Men were boys until the day they died. No problem, Madame Rosmerta, he said. She noticed his downward glance, and her cheeks flushed. My apologies, madam. I can only say, you're far too beautiful. He said it without the slightest guilt. She gave him a shy, reproachful look, then turned with a smile to prepare his lunch. He shrugged, letting his eyes roam over her elegant form once more, then looked out the window. Hogsmeade was undeniably tiny, almost pitifully so, and sparsely populated. The wizarding world had never been bustling. Britain held only a few thousand witches and wizards, roughly the size of a moderately populated village in his homeland. In that case, my war with the White Wizard was really just a village feud. No, since we both had wands, a village-level armed conflict. He chuckled aloud at the thought, earning a curious glance from Rosmerta. After lunch, Voldemort didn't wait for the Hogwarts flue to open. He went to Elegant Witch and Wizard Outfitters. He wanted something with style. Elegant had advertised at the Quidditch World Cup, giving it some prestige. Madame Malkin's on Diagon Alley was too ordinary, and while Transcendence Taylor's was good, its men's line was mediocre. Welcome. How can I help you? The shopgirl asked, her warmth almost uncomfortable. She likely hadn't seen a customer all morning. I'll take one set of robes. If the quality's good, I may take two. His eyes scanned the shop until a set caught them. Black, with simple violet embroidery at the chest and arms, silver edging on the collar and cuffs. The robe was slim cut, not shapeless. He'd never seen a wizard's robe like it. This is our newest design by Madame Westwood, made from... I'll try it, Voldemort interrupted. Soon he was wearing it, and he had to admit, it sharpened his presence. The fabric's comfortable. How much? 26 galleons for the full set, she said, voice tinged with excitement. He paused. Not cheap. Pack up what I was wearing before. He paid and left. From elegant, he went to Dervish and Bang's at Hogsmeade's Edge. He needed tools to repair the vanishing cabinet. A full wizarding cabinet repair kit is rare these days, the shopkeeper said, placing a heavy box on the counter. It comes with a manual, but you'll need some alchemical knowledge. Voldemort nodded, paid, and glanced at a sneakoscope on the counter. He'd considered buying one, but the constant shrieking put him off. This latest model has adjustable volume, plus... No, thank you, he said, shrinking the box into a cloth pouch. Enlargement charms on personal items were illegal, but who cared? The shopkeeper pretended not to see. Leaving, Voldemort returned to the 3 broomsticks. Quirrell, that robe is perfect on you, Rosmerta said genuinely as he walked in. I think so too, he said, flicking the hem. Slim robes are far more comfortable. I agree, though most British wizards prefer loose ones. Americans like the slim cut. She reached out to touch the fabric. He didn't move. Leaning closer, she wore a perfume he hadn't noticed before, and her makeup was refined, striking. You touched up your makeup, he asked. What? Oh, yes. A faint blush rose on her cheeks. I washed my face and just fixed it a little. Voldemort smiled. This little was far from subtle. This suits you better, he said softly. You look even more beautiful. Really? She touched her cheek shyly. A faint tension hung in the air, and Voldemort felt that if he didn't act soon, the bright noon sun would pass them by wasted. Rosmerta, bring me a drink. Just then, the door swung open, breaking the moment. Madame Rosmerta, flustered, hurriedly turned back toward the bar. In that case, I'll use the flue, Voldemort said, heading toward the stairs leading to the pub's upper floor. Merlin's beard, I'd love to hit that bearded oaf with an Avada Kedavra, Voldemort thought irritably. Chapter 15, Dumbledore's Consultation. Professor McGonagall, it's been a while. Emerging from the swirl of green fire in the flue, Voldemort forced a smile. He had already decided never to travel this way again. Quirrell, you look a bit worse for wear, McGonagall said, glancing up from her desk. Her eyes, peering over the rim of her spectacles, carried the same strict air as a teacher catching a student in the act. But nice robes. Thank you. He brushed at the dust on his clothes, stubbornly clinging, and finally resorted to a silent scourgify. Silent casting, very good. Seems the Forbidden Forest has done you some good, she remarked before returning to the mountain of documents before her. As deputy headmistress, the days before term left her no shortage of work. You know where the headmaster's office is. The password is Toffee Finger Biscuit. Yes, Professor. Voldemort inclined his head and left. As he walked the staircases of Hogwarts, memory stirred deep within his soul, bringing a faint warmth, the echo of the shard of his soul that still lingered here. That fragment clearly loved this place. Soon he reached the corridor on the 8th floor, stopping before the stone gargoyle. Your turn, Voldemort murmured to Quirrell's soul, relinquishing control. Quirrell took the lead, while Voldemort's presence slipped into the dense blood curse binding them. He didn't drift into sleep. Instead, he watched silently from the shadows. Toffee Finger Biscuit, Quirrell declared, squaring his shoulders to the gargoyle. Whump! The gargoyle leapt aside, revealing a spiral staircase rising slowly upward. Quirrell, came Dumbledore's voice from above. Yes, Headmaster, it's me. Quirrell steadied himself. Come up. I've got some biscuits for you. Thank you, sir. Climbing the moving stairs, Quirrell entered a wide, elegant circular room. At the far end, behind a grand, slender-legged desk, Dumbledore sat absorbed in his reading, not looking up. Help yourself to some finger biscuits. I just need to finish this part, Dumbledore said without raising his head. All right, Headmaster. Please carry on. As he spoke, Quirrell let his gaze wander. Most eye-catching were the row of silver instruments on the desk. Through Quirrell's eyes, Voldemort noted a silver cigarette lighter, a gold watch, and behind Dumbledore, the sorting hat. Their attention soon shifted to the papers Dumbledore held, a brochure, clearly Muggle print, with static pictures. Quirrell stole a quick glance. It was a hospital leaflet promoting blood donation. Thump, thump. Quirrell's heartbeat quickened. "You seem nervous," Dumbledore remarked, finally lifting his head, giving a gentle smile. "Here, try some honey water. It helps with tension." With a flick of the Elder Wand, a glass of golden liquid appeared in front of Quirrell. "Thank you." "I'm just not sure I'm ready for the Defense Against the Dark Arts post," Quirrell said, taking a cautious sip. "You've taught Muggle studies before. That's teaching experience. You've also ventured into the Forbidden Forest. That's field experience. So no need to worry." Quirrell forced a tense smile, then straightened, bracing himself as though for an interview question. "No rush," Dumbledore said mildly. "I actually wanted to consult you on something." He lifted the brochure slightly. "About Muggle hospitals, specifically blood draws. Judging from this leaflet, I may have picked the wrong pamphlet. But tell me, how much blood do Muggles usually take?" Quirrell blinked, confusion clouding his eyes. Headmaster, I thought I was here to interview for Defense Against the Dark Arts, not—" "Oh, you misunderstand," Dumbledore chuckled, leaning back. "It's a personal question, not part of the interview." "Ah," Quirrell nodded, pretending to understand, thinking for a moment. "It depends on the case, but generally they prefer to take a bit more." "Why?" Dumbledore asked. "To confirm the diagnosis and avoid what they call Luon complications," Quirrell explained. "They run tests on the blood to determine the cause of illness. The broader the tests, the more potential causes they can rule out. If they take too little and miss the problem, it causes trouble later. That's Luon." Dumbledore nodded, frowning slightly. "And the amount taken, it wouldn't endanger someone's life, would it?" "Of course not. They have strict regulations. If anything happened, they'd be held responsible." "Oh, and what about taking so much that it leaves someone feeling weak? How common is that?" Quirrell raised an eyebrow, puzzled. After a moment, he said, "I'm not sure. Ever since I came to Hogwarts, I haven't set foot in a Muggle hospital." Dumbledore smiled. "I only went once out of curiosity. Didn't actually do anything there." Quirrell returned the smile, then asked, "Is the headmaster asking because there's some matter that needs attention in a Muggle hospital? Or is it something else?" "A child," Dumbledore replied. "He went for a checkup at a Muggle hospital, and the results showed anemia. He's very frail, which might explain part of it." Quirrell shook his head, indicating he didn't fully grasp the connection. "Well, that clears up most of my questions," Dumbledore said, sounding entirely reassured. Though whether he truly was, no one could say. "In fact, I still think you'd be well suited to teaching Muggle studies. For that subject, I've always preferred hiring wizards who came into our world from the outside." "But I really have no interest in that course," Quirrell said, frowning slightly, a hint of grievance in his tone. "Of course, you're hardly alone in that," Dumbledore replied, a touch of helplessness in his voice. Then, as if a thought had just occurred to him, he added, "I heard about what happened at Old Tom's place. You seem braver than before." Quirrell froze for a moment, then realized Old Tom's place must mean the leaky cauldron, and that incident. The vampire's curse has made me a bit high-strung. I had just returned to the wizarding world then, so I wasn't fully adjusted, Quirrell explained quickly, eager to ensure that episode wouldn't negatively affect Dumbledore's assessment. "No need to be nervous, child," Dumbledore reassured him. "Courage is no fault, and risking your life is hardly something to praise them for." Quirrell nodded, feeling much the same. Chapter 16, Voldemort's Teaching Philosophy. "Tell me about the blood curse," Dumbledore said gently. "It's not a common type of curse. It happened during a hunt. I wandered too close to Mount Oricchino." Quirrell began the story he had long rehearsed. Dumbledore listened patiently, nodding occasionally, and only spoke again once Quirrell had finished. "May I take a look?" he asked, peering over his half-moon spectacles. Of course. If you can lift the curse right away, that would be wonderful," Quirrell replied, feigning surprise and delight. Meanwhile, deep within the blood curse, Voldemort, watching from afar, immediately sank into dormancy, erasing any trace that could reveal him. "I'm not particularly skilled with curses," Dumbledore admitted, rising as the hem of his long purple robe swept the floor. "But I can at least take a look. Perhaps there's a way." Quirrell nodded repeatedly, activating occlumency, not to block Dumbledore from inspecting the curse, but to shield his true memories. "You may feel a little dizzy, but it will pass quickly," Dumbledore said softly. The Elder Wand traced 2 quick arcs before pressing lightly to Quirrell's forehead. It was similar to legilimency, but altered. He wasn't prying into Quirrell's memories, only making the curse's mark flare in his eyes. "This vampire is stronger than I expected," Dumbledore murmured, leaning closer to examine Quirrell's eyes. With his free hand, he gently lifted Quirrell's eyelids, revealing more of the curse's pattern, like a bite mark, the upper and lower fangs especially pronounced, its sinister aura buried deep in Quirrell's gaze. "It's probably a female vampire. That's relatively good news." Swish. The Elder Wand flicked again and the curse's mark faded from sight. "From what I know of curses, this one is fully set. There's no way to remove it. If anyone could, it would be the one who placed the curse on the defense against the dark arts position." A shiver ran through Quirrell at those words. He looked frightened, but kept his jaw clenched and said nothing. "They say he's somewhere in the Forbidden Forest. You haven't met him?" Dumbledore asked casually. "You mean the Dark Lord?" Quirrell forced the words past his tightening throat. "Voldemort. I prefer to call him that," Dumbledore said, eyes fixed on him. Quirrell flinched like a startled rabbit, but stayed silent. Thanks to his acting lessons, he managed the performance well enough that Dumbledore seemed oblivious. "I haven't seen him. Headmaster, please don't say his name again," Quirrell said. Dumbledore smiled faintly and let it drop, steering the conversation elsewhere. "Perhaps you could try getting along with the vampire. Love can redeem both her and her curse." As he spoke, his gaze swept up and down Quirrell. "Judging by appearances, you may have already started trying." Quirrell gave an awkward laugh, shifting his shoulders as if recovering from fear. "All right, enough of that," Dumbledore said, ending the uncomfortable topic. "Let's talk about your lessons." Quirrell immediately straightened, looking like a man well prepared. "First, I'll be adding more practical training," Quirrell declared firmly. "My experience in the Forbidden Forest showed me my own shortcomings and the flaws in the defense curriculum." Dumbledore nodded, giving him an encouraging look. "My lack of skill with defensive and offensive spells nearly cost me my life early on. If it weren't for the potions I prepared, I might never have made it out." "A dangerous journey indeed. Be more careful next time," Dumbledore advised. "Yes, I will," Quirrell agreed, continuing. "Second, I want to coordinate with the charms and herbology professors, ideally with Professor Snape as well. Charms can be used for both defense and attack. Herbology offers many dangerous plants in places like the Forbidden Forest, and potions, they're life-saving." Dumbledore nodded again, clearly approving. "And finally?" Quirrell glanced toward the Sorting Hat, hesitating slightly. "Speak your mind. We're discussing, aren't we?" Dumbledore encouraged. Quirrell nodded, choosing his words carefully. "Finally, I don't think every student is suited for direct combat. I don't mean cowardice, just—" He looked faintly embarrassed, recalling past mockery. Though he had improved, speaking of it still felt uncomfortable. "I understand. Please go on." Dumbledore tapped the Elder Wand against Quirrell's cup, refilling it, an act that eased the awkwardness. "Thank you," Quirrell said, letting out a slow breath before continuing. Dumbledore gave a small nod, signaling that there was no need to rush. "I believe different students should be taught different approaches to combat," Quirrell began once he had calmed, laying out his thoughts. "Brave Gryffindors, they're best suited for dueling, for head-on confrontations. They can even incorporate close-quarters fighting into their style. Their founder, after all, fought with a wand in one hand and a long sword in the other." Dumbledore's eyebrows rose slightly, a hint of surprise at the freshness of Quirrell's ideas. "Then there's us, Ravenclaws. Most of us have memorized a vast array of spells as students, but our practical skills lag behind. I think we're better suited to winning through cunning." "Like your recent trip to the Forbidden Forest?" Dumbledore asked. "Yes," Quirrell nodded. "If I hadn't prepared thoroughly, especially with potions and after reading enough travelogues, I doubt I would have made it out of the forest." Dumbledore nodded again, clearly approving. "Slytherins, in my view, they tend to have greater magical power than the average wizard. Pureblood heritage offers an advantage, so they're better suited to powerful magic. Dumbledore's brows drew together slightly. He clearly disliked the sentiment, but he still inclined his head. Most purebloods do have stronger magical signatures than Muggleborns, but I'd rather you not plant that belief in the students' minds, he said thoughtfully. Of course not. Besides, I'm not a pureblood myself, yet through constant practice my magic is no weaker than most of them, Quirrell said with a hint of pride. Dumbledore nodded once more before asking, with curiosity, "And Hufflepuff? Some say they're the least gifted." "Standardized combat training," Quirrell replied without hesitation, clearly prepared. "Hufflepuffs aren't as brave as Gryffindors, as quick-witted as Ravenclaws, or as naturally strong in magic as Slytherins, but they are the most enduring, the most persistent of all four houses." Dumbledore's slow nod confirmed his agreement. "Give them a fixed combat routine and drill it to perfection. They don't need to know an excess of spells, nor chase the most powerful ones. If it's useful and flows smoothly, that's enough. And with their persistence, by the time they graduate, in sudden battle, most students from the other houses wouldn't be able to defeat them." "A very clear vision," Dumbledore praised warmly. "If implemented well, I dare say the overall combat ability of Hogwarts graduates would rise significantly." Quirrell felt a surge of excitement. Though the ideas were Voldemort's, receiving Dumbledore's approval gave him a sense of shared pride. "Of course," Dumbledore added slowly, reining in Quirrell's enthusiasm, "there would still be complications." Chapter 17, Dumbledore's Final Test. Each class is shared by 2 houses. It's meant to encourage interaction between students from different houses, so Dumbledore trailed off, reaching for a toffee finger biscuit and taking a bite. It was clear he expected Quirrell to propose a solution. "Set up a live combat training ground," Quirrell suggested. "Participation would require mixed teams made up of students from all 4 houses. That way, the problem of inter-house interaction is solved." "That's one approach," Dumbledore acknowledged, sipping his honey water. "But where would such a training ground be?" "The Forbidden Forest," Quirrell said confidently. "If you allow it, I'll need Hagrid as an assistant professor. He can help locate enough magical creatures." "Seems you've thought this through," Dumbledore said, setting down his biscuit and frowning in thought. Quirrell waited quietly, knowing this was a major change to how defense against the dark arts would be taught. "Agree to it," a woman's voice suddenly said, startling them both. It came from the portrait of Headmistress Dilys Derwent, who had led Hogwarts in the mid-18th century and was renowned both at the school and in the wizarding world. "Oh, Dilys," Dumbledore said warmly. "Let's hear your view. You've been silent for far too long." "My portrait hangs in St. Mungo's. I've seen far too many inept wizards. In the past 2 centuries, their true combat ability has plummeted," she said, rolling her eyes dramatically. "In my day, a witch or wizard could hold their own against dozens of foes. Now, they can be killed by a pinch of flu powder gone wrong. Fools, the lot of them. It's high time they toughened up." "Dilys, fighting muggles is one thing. Using faulty flu powder is another," said a nearby portrait, Headmaster Phineas Nigellus Black, equally famous in his time. "I know," she shot back, irritated, "but I can't stand their stupidity. A little danger helps them understand the world." "Very well," Dumbledore cut in, stopping further argument. "I accept your advice. However—" He turned to Quirrell, who met his gaze with curiosity and anticipation. "How will you handle scheduling?" Dumbledore asked. "If you have to teach each house every year separately, you'll run yourself ragged." "Perhaps I could use a time turner," Quirrell offered. He had used one in his 3rd year, though it later left him chronologically disoriented. This time, however, it was Voldemort's will that prompted the idea. "No," Dumbledore said flatly. "Adult magic interferes with it. Doubling your hours would exhaust you, and any curse on the post could intensify." Quirrell shuddered, gulping down a glass of honey water before speaking again. "Then I'll merge 2 adjacent year groups from the same house. One lesson will cover 2 sets of material with help from 7th-year assistants. That should work." Dumbledore removed his half-moon glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, looking both weary and thoughtful. Quirrell waited. He knew his requests were ambitious, but they were Voldemort's design. 40 years ago, Voldemort had sought the Defense Against the Dark Arts post, and when refused, he had cursed it. Now, at last, the wish was fulfilled, and these teaching plans, Quirrell couldn't help thinking that all of this, the intricate plans, the radical changes, was the product of decades of obsession, refined over 40 years. Viewed that way, their complexity no longer seemed unreasonable. Some of it, he knew, came from Voldemort's fragmented soul, though the merged soul had cut away the most extreme elements, like the idea of letting students fight until one side collapsed unconscious. "So," Dumbledore said at last, "you're asking to establish a combat ground in the Forbidden Forest, overhaul the core structure, and have several assistants, including Hagrid?" Quirrell blinked. Put that way, his demands did sound rather excessive. I suppose that's about right," he admitted reluctantly. "I think you've just given Professor McGonagall a sizable headache." With a wave of his wand, a silver phoenix burst from the Elder Wand, circled the room, and swept out the door, presumably to deliver a message to McGonagall. "If she can adjust the timetable to your needs, I'll support your changes to Defense Against the Dark Arts," Dumbledore said, moving aside a blood donation pamphlet and pulling out a blank sheet of parchment. "But if the schedule can't be altered, will you agree to teach using the standard format?" "Of course," Quirrell said firmly. "Ravenclaw wisdom teaches me always to have a backup plan." "Then give me a moment to write your appointment letter," Dumbledore replied, beginning to draft it on the spot. It might have looked like mere formality, but Quirrell doubted that a great wizard like Dumbledore would waste his time. Hogwarts was mysterious enough that this step was probably necessary. Quirrell fought to contain the surge of joy in his chest, keeping his expression calm. Still, his eyes couldn't help wandering to Dumbledore's elegant, flowing script. And then he spotted something extraordinary. Right in front of the appointment letter, previously hidden under the blood donation pamphlet, peeked a short note. It read, "Dear Dumbledore, I will temporarily store the Philosopher's Stone in Gringotts Vault 713 on the morning of July 31st. I hope you can retrieve it before nightfall, for the goblins have their eyes on it. Your dear friend, Nicholas Flamel." Brief though it was, the letter's contents were enough to drive any wizard mad with desire. Yet in that instant, Quirrell felt not greed, but fear, certain that Dumbledore had deliberately let him see it. His master had long suspected the Philosopher's Stone might be a ruse. "My goodness, Headmaster, is that truly the Philosopher's Stone?" he blurted out, drawing a look of surprise from Dumbledore. "Oh, it's still here. I really should have put that away," Dumbledore said, tucking the letter into his robes, though it was obviously far too late for that. "I mean," Quirrell's face was still full of astonishment. "This is incredible. I never imagined I could be so close to it." "You are far from it, my boy," Dumbledore replied, amused. "All right, Headmaster, you're right." Quirrell slumped back in his chair like a deflated balloon, as though what Dumbledore had just put away wasn't a letter, but the stone itself. If Voldemort had been awake, he would have described Quirrell's feeling with a Chinese phrase, "Quo yi," a mistake born of misplaced expectations. Chapter 18. I cursed myself before the appointment letter was even finished. The Silver Phoenix had already returned. Though Professor McGonagall was quite upset, she still rearranged the timetable, Dumbledore said cheerfully. "You're free to carry out your ideas. Once the letter's done, I'll also send Hagrid a note asking him to serve as your assistant." "Thank you, Headmaster Dumbledore," Quirrell replied sincerely. "I only hope you can avoid that curse. Otherwise, a year from now." Dumbledore's voice trailed off as he bent over the parchment, the weight of Voldemort's curse evident in his tone. Quirrell exhaled slowly. Even without acting, he truly feared that curse. After all, it came from his own master. Snap. The Hogwarts seal, lion, badger, eagle, and serpent pressed into the letter with a faint magical shimmer as it met the parchment. "Well then." Dumbledore lifted the letter and looked at Quirrell. "Welcome home, Quirrell. This is your second post at Hogwarts." "Thank you." Quirrell rose with excitement and took the letter. At that moment, the curse struck. A shiver ran through him, and deep within, the Voldemort hiding inside the blood curse stirred, startled by his own magic. "Your reaction seems stronger than most?" Dumbledore asked with concern. "Are you feeling unwell?" "No," Quirrell answered quickly. "It must be the blood curse. It makes me more sensitive to such magic." Dumbledore nodded, still watching him with worry. After a moment he said, "I'll try again to break it. If you notice anything, tell me." Of course, Headmaster. I'll head back now. The training grounds in the Forbidden Forest, once I've sorted my plans, I'll build them with Hagrid. Dumbledore nodded again, scribbling a quick note for Quirrell, a pass for Hagrid. If you need the flu, speak to Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore added. Yes, Headmaster. Quirrell bowed and left. Once outside the headmaster's office, Voldemort seized control of the body. Quirrell immediately began recounting what had happened while Voldemort had slept. You did well, but we must hurry back to deal with the curse. My own curse, Voldemort said with a touch of bitter irony. Wait, I cursed myself? Doesn't seem like it, said Headmaster Phineas Nigellus's portrait once Quirrell had left. Albus, what did you sense from the blood curse? Asked the portrait of Armando Dippet, who had stayed silent until now. A vampire's curse, and nothing else, Dumbledore said thoughtfully. He doesn't appear to have met Voldemort, but we know how cunning Voldemort can be. The headmaster's portraits fell into a long silence. It's time to investigate the old pureblood families, Dumbledore finally said, rising and adjusting his robes. Perhaps he's hiding in one of their estates. Check the Malfoys. They're the most two-faced, suggested Headmistress Dilys Derwent's portrait. And the Parkinsons, added Dippet's portrait. Their hands aren't clean either. I'll see them all, Dumbledore said, extending his right arm. Fawkes the Phoenix swooped from his perch and landed gracefully on it. A moment later, whoosh, they vanished from the room. 36 Horse Street. Declining Madame Rosmerta's dinner invitation, Voldemort hurried back here. He needed to examine the curse in detail before it fully took hold. The constant struggle between two souls had already caused his fragmentary spirit to lose complete memory of its design. It's definitely not a killing curse. Even at my most ruthless, I never meant to slaughter all wizards, not even the Muggleborns, Voldemort murmured. In a locked upstairs room, he set a golden cauldron on its stand, perfect for blending magically incompatible ingredients, exactly what he needed now. My remaining memories suggest the curse was adapted from a mental hex. Perhaps I've used this magic recently. As he spoke, he filled the cauldron with water and added narcissus petals, a death-aspected herb, ideal for forging a link with a curse. The method for casting the curse, I still remember it. Using the Slytherin bloodline from that body, I drew on the power of the Chamber of Secrets, weaving it into the very fabric of the castle itself. In other words, unless Hogwarts is rebuilt from the ground up, or unless I receive the appointment letter for this position, the curse will remain, a troublesome piece of work. No wonder even Dumbledore couldn't break it. Incendio. The yew wand touched the cauldron's base, and flames roared to life. Voldemort's hands didn't pause. He began pulling African tree snake skin into fine threads, key to linking two opposing ingredients. 1/3 first, stir 3 times clockwise, then reverse counterclockwise. Reciting the steps from memory ensured his movements were precise. Next, dried crocodile heart, slice thin, crush, then add. Another 1/3 of the tree snake threads, 3 turns counterclockwise. Silent bird feather, rare stuff. Reduced to a low flame, let it simmer quietly. Adjusting the fire, Voldemort sat cross-legged beside the cauldron. While waiting, he probed his shattered memories for more details about the curse, but found nothing. It's time to start absorbing the souls and memories from the Horcruxes. It was a decision he had made long ago. He had doubted back then whether he could overpower them. But now, whether he could or not, it had to be done. To be trapped by his own curse, one he had cast himself, wasn't just humiliating, it was dangerous. As he pondered, the muddy yellow potion began to bubble, its volume shrinking rapidly. 3 drops of Dittany extract to counteract the narcissus, added separately. Murmuring the words, Voldemort let the first drop fall. The liquid's shrinking slowed slightly, though it still moved quickly, and the yellow darkened, releasing a strange odor. The second drop turned the yellow to dark brown. The shrinking slowed further, but the smell grew so strong Voldemort nearly pinched his nose. The 3rd drop blackened the potion entirely. A wave of stench rolled out, and the shrinking stopped. At the bottom of the golden cauldron lay a shallow puddle. Finite. With a flick at the base, the flames vanished. The potion was complete. Curse-revealing draught? Did my old self really not care about how a potion looks or smells? He stared at the foul black liquid, his expression twisting into reluctant embarrassment. Chapter 19. I must control myself. The pitch-black potion quickly filled the room with a stench so foul it made the air itself